Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome once again to another session with Witr Rahmani fi Tafsir al-Quran by becoming one of our favorites, Mudiruddin al-Ulaymi rahimahullah ta'ala. The last time we were together for this particular work, we were talking about the first half or so of Surah al-Fajr, and we concluded with the verse, Inna rabbaka labil mirsad, meaning your Lord is truly observant. And that's where we're going to pick up. The next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا بَتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ. And so this verse, as the great Imam says, is in regards to every denier of faith. He revealed this verse, which means now, whenever a human being is tested, meaning they're tried by their Lord by way of blessing, consequently he is generous and provides him comfort, meaning the comfort is given through abundant wealth. Okay, so he says, فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ. So he's generous and provides him with comfort, meaning abundant wealth. Thus they boast, my Lord has honored me. فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا. They boast, they say, my Lord has honored me. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is essentially, this verse and the following is going to refute the idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives abundant provision out of honor, as a show of honor, because it's given as a form of test and trial. So that's important for us to remember, that when we receive abundance in this life, it doesn't necessarily mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honoring us and raising us in rank because we're rich and we're wealthy. If you note, you will find that among the wealthiest and richest of this world, they are deniers of faith. In regards to every denier of faith, as the Imam says here, this verse was revealed. So it's not a measure of honor, the amount of wealth and money that you possess, but it is a test that has to be passed. And you can find the sentiment of this in another verse in the Quran, Surah al-Mu'minun, chapter 23, verses 55 and 56. أَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّمَا نُمِدُّهُمْ بِهِ مِنْ مَالٍ وَبَنِينَ. Says, do they think that in wealth and children with which we will extend them or provide for them? نُسَارِعُ لَهُمْ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ بَلْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. We hasten unto them with good things, nay, but they perceive not. Do they think that that's what's happening, that they're giving good things? No, they perceive not. So basically, it's not that you're getting some blessing because of your status or because, you're going to be acknowledged here for something good, but you're getting something in order to be tested for it when you have wealth, which is typically the opposite of what people understand or can infer from receiving blessings and comfort. They think, oh, look, I must be doing the right thing. If I wasn't, Allah wouldn't be happy with me. Because we often equate happiness and success with wealth, with monetary value. You say, look, I have this amount of money, I have these many homes and this property and investments, and my business is generating X amount of dollars per year, etc., etc. I don't have to work anymore. I just sit back and I live a life of luxury. I must be doing something right because Allah loves me and Allah has bestowed this upon me. So they would use that as a proof for perhaps the sins that they're committing and the injustice that they're a part of. Perhaps. Whereas when a person is withheld from and they are restricted when it comes to their financial means, then they might think, well, now I'm being tested and tried. So this is the other end of the spectrum. When your sustenance is being curtailed, when it's being withheld, that is when they believe that Allah is humiliating them. So it's either an honoring or a humiliating. So the next verse, Allah says, وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا بَتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. He says, but when Allah tests them, meaning He tests them with poverty, by limiting their provision, they protest. فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. My Lord has dishonored me by humiliating me with this poverty. So here you can get an idea of kind of the general concept that it's very clear in the verses. It's explicit when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا بَتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ. That when mankind is tested by their Lord. Okay, that's the first one. The next one says, وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا بَتَلَاهُ. Again, same thing, when he's tested. So one way he's tested by giving wealth, and one way he's tested or she's tested by the withholding of that wealth or the restricting of that wealth. It's a test, and it's not as they perceive, not as a form of honor or a form of degradation and humiliation. You'll note that here the Imam points out there's some recitations that can be applied to this particular verse. These verses, I should say. He says here as an example, Abu Ja'far ibn Amir recited here فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ with a doubling. They put a shadda on the dal, فَقَدَّرَ عَلَيْهِ. So what we normally would hear, فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ. Then there's another recitation, فَقَدَّرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. And this gives you kind of an idea of what else is out there. There's other ones. Nafi, Abu Ja'far ibn Kathir, Abu Umar recited Rabbi. We say فَيَقُولُ Rabbi أَهَانًا. They recited Rabbiya with a fatha on the ya in both of the verses, the previous one and this one we're just talking about here. And the others, they retained the sukoon on this so that it was Rabbi akraman, Rabbi ahanan. So you might notice that if you're standing behind someone that's reciting different verses or different recitations, modes of recitation. And there are other modes that he points out here, which we will leave for the sake of time. The next verse he says, كَلَّا بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمِ. كَلَّا بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمِ would be the best way to recite. كَلَّا, there's a permissible stop here. كَلَّا بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمِ. So basically, كَلَّا, absolutely not. He's saying absolutely not. And this is kind of a deterrent, a negation, if you will, for mankind to consider wealth as either a form of honor or poverty as a form of humiliation, as I just mentioned before. So they're saying that Allah has honored me and Allah has humiliated me, and so now Allah says, Kalla. No, it's not this and it's not that. So when a person is given wealth, as we said, it's a test, gratitude and obedience is due from whoever is tested with wealth. So that's the test. When you have wealth, you're tried with that wealth to be obedient, meaning you're going to employ that wealth and utilize it in a manner which is halal, and you're going to be grateful for that wealth. You're going to have to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for bestowing that upon you. Then if you're tested with poverty and your wealth is restricted, the test would be passed if you exercised not only gratitude, but also patience. That you're going to be patient with the challenges that you face living in poverty. When it comes to a person's honor being, acknowledged as being someone honorable, then that's done by way of taqwa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honorable, if you will, of you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those who are most God-fearing, or those that have the most taqwa. And humiliation and degradation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by way of sin and transgression. So that's the ultimate form of humiliation. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after that, kalla, he says, بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمِ. Here basically informs them of the deeds that they did by saying, rather, Bel, rather we'd say, your actions are much worse than your words. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would show them how they have destroyed themselves with their wealth because لا تكرمون اليتيم. They did not show graciousness to the orphan. They didn't spend in benevolence upon the orphan with their wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them wealth, but they denied spending upon the orphan for one reason or another. So the orphan, he mentions, is from the offspring of Adam. He is a human being. And the orphan in Islam is a child who has lost their father before the age of puberty. They lost their father before the age of puberty. And he notes here that the orphan animal is the opposite. It's a creature who has lost its mother before it's able to take care of itself. So here what you can note is the status of the orphan. This was being like a mi'yar, it's like a gauge, if you will, for their deeds, those that have wealth. If they utilize their wealth in a particular manner, it's specified here because the orphan was honored by the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Ana wa kafilul yatim kahataini fil jannah." He says, I and the guardian of the orphan will be in paradise like these two. And he put his two fingers together, the middle finger and the index finger. Ana wa kafilul yatim fil jannati kahatain, meaning they will be like companions in Jannah, the person that takes care of an orphan. The Prophet ﷺ also said that the most beloved homes to Allah are those within which there is an orphan being shown generosity. And so, obviously we're talking about those that had wealth but did not treat the orphan that was in their care in such a way. لا تكرمون اليتيم. You did not show graciousness to the orphan. The next verse reads, وَلَا تَحَاضُّونَ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Nor do you urge one another. They do not encourage each other here. There's some linguistic nuance to this particular verb. وَلَا تَحَاضُّونَ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. تَحَاضُّونَ has the origin of the word is تَتَحَاضُّونَ, and it was removed here. The تَتَحَاضَدُونَ, it was shortened. The ta, when one ta was taken out, takhfifan, as well as the da made together. Sometimes the Arabs, they do that with their language in order to keep things short and sweet and easy to say. They'll do a little mix and match, take some out, move it around, and there you go. But basically the verb structure is one that means there is a cooperation of sorts between more than one person that's happening here. Like, does anyone know an example of this? This the verb structure, which indicates a cooperation, or it's more than one person doing it. يتقاتل, for example, where the people are fighting each other as opposed to one person who's fighting. They're both fighting. So the verb structure means it's happening within two or more people. I don't know what the right word in English is, but it's a verb form in which it denotes that it's not just one person doing it, but it's more than one person that's involved in the particular action. Dueling, yeah, dueling. Sure, fighting and dueling each other, good. So that's what we understand from this particular word structure here. وَلَا تَحَاضُّونَ, that they do not encourage one another. As opposed to meaning like you do not encourage feeding the orphan. It means you do not encourage one another, or among yourselves you do not encourage feeding the poor. عَلَى الطَّعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. So we see here عَلَى الطَّعَامِ, which means food. You do not encourage each other for the food of the orphan is what it's literally translated as. But what's intended here by the word food is to feed the orphan. Not that you don't encourage you to go take the food of the orphan or to, whatever else. what's intended here is that you don't encourage each other to feed the orphan. Again, we're hitting back on the nature of the orphan, or I should say the poor here. It says miskeen. The nature of the poor here, similar to the orphan in their status. Loving the poor is a quality of piety, and looking after the poor is an opportunity of the righteous. It should be seen as an opportunity as opposed to a burden. Sometimes you think that people are in need. Depending on your culture, if you're living in a society like this, oftentimes that's looked upon as a burden. And so a person of piety and faith would see a poor person as an opportunity for good deeds, that they could utilize the wealth that they have in order to support somebody else. وَلَا تَحَاضُونَ عَلَى الطَّعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ وَتَأْكُلُونَ التُّرَاثَ أَكْلَ اللَّمَّةِ. He says, and you devour turath. Turath typically means like legacy, the legacy of someone. And the legacy in this case means inheritance. So a person's legacy would be their inheritance. And it's from the word wurath. And so basically what that means is وَتَأْكُلُونَ التُّرَاثَ أَكْلَ اللَّمَّةِ, meaning you consume all of the inheritance greedily. أَكْلَ اللَّمَّةِ, you consume that wealth like in a severe fashion. So the lemma here, it means like in totality, because they did not give inheritance to women or to young children, but they would add it to their own wealth, and it would be as if they had consumed it all. وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا, he says, and love wealth fervently, meaning you love wealth with great intensity, to the point that you do not spend it. That's what we're understanding. That's what the insinuation is of the verse. Yeah, that's what you should understand. They love wealth to the degree that they will not spend it. وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. And the next verse he reads, كَلَّا إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا دَكًّا. Says, enough. كَلَّا إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا دَكًّا. Basically, here's a refutation, or Allah is rebuking the actions of theirs that were committed. We just mentioned a number of those things. And encroaching upon the warning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it means basically that they will see that their actions were not righteous. The actions that they committed, they were not righteous. When? إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا دَكًّا. When the earth is entirely crushed over and over, one time after another. And that means, this verse, what it means is that the earth will be flattened, such that all of the mountains will be removed, and every structure upon the earth will be destroyed entirely, such that it is completely flattened. He notes here, he is bringing from some example, shahid min al-lugha. There's like a Arabic, some evidence used from the Arabic language, that the camel, they say the cat is the camel that has no hump on it. It's flat. And so they're using that as kind of express the meaning of what dakka means here. Meaning is to be flattened. And so when it's said a second time, the first time it's flattened, when it says the second time, it's like everything's flattened. Like without exception, all things have been flattened and been destroyed. The next verse reads, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. Here, the literal translation, and your Lord comes. And we talked about this in the Aqidah class with Imam Ibn Qudama. And the author of the book, in the explanation of وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ, he says that Imam Ahmad said the meaning is وَجَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ. This is a riwayah that's been reported. It's a narration reported from Imam Ahmad, which means that the command of your Lord has come. وَجَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ. This is one riwayah. There is debate surrounding the authenticity of the riwayah. As we've talked about in the previous class, the Lum'at al-I'tiqad by Ibn Qudam, we talked about this particular verse. We talked about Sifat al-Maji'a wal-Ityan. We talked about those. And we come to an understanding that the position of the Imam and his ashab were one of al-Imrar, right, is to traverse over these. And not to assign bila tafsir, without an explanation. But we would affirm them and attest to them, and then we would traverse over them without assigning a meaning to them, or a modality, or a limitation, or a restriction. It would just be traversal. And we talked about what al-imrar meant. It means al-jahl bil-ma'na, right? To not understand or to know what the actual meaning of it is when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, Murjiruddin, if we've talked about his tafsir in a general way, and we've looked at examples of sifatullah that he has addressed on more than one occasion, and you will find that the methodology of the author is that of Imam Ahmad and his ashab, his companions and his disciples. However, because this was a riwayah, he narrated this as if this is what he believed was an authentic narration, and so he mentioned it here in his tafsir. Right, again, this is debated among the companions of Imam Ahmad and his great disciples as to whether it was authentic, or even if it was authentic, they have a they have a kind of approach to that, in such that he may have said something like this, وَجَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ, while he was debating with the Mu'tazila. And so sometimes a person in a debate may say something that they don't actually believe in order to pin the opponent into a corner. Not that they actually give credence to that, but it's a manner of argumentation in which you put them in a corner so that now they're stuck. So that's how it's been explained. Either is not authentic narration, or it was, but based on Imam Ahmad's methodology and his approach, and also him talking about this particular verse, he addressed it in such a manner that was explicit enough to understand that he did not assign, he did not make ta'wil. Because if you said وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ means وَجَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ, you're making ta'wil, which is to interpret. You're making an interpretation, and we understand there's la bila tafsir wa la ta'wil. That's the methodology here. Bila tafsir and la ta'wil. Okay? Hopefully that's clear. But that riwayah of Imam Ahmad has been mentioned by a number of great imams of the past, like Imam al-Bayhaqi, Imam al-Kathir, also mentioned in Bidayah wa Nihaya, if memory serves correct. And so it's something that kind of has made its way into the legacy, if you will, of the corpus when it comes to tafsir. So basically, he says here, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا, and then the angels will come in rows, one row up after the other. So it says here, angel, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ. Al-Malak is one angel. But what's intended here is ismul jins. It's like the category of angels. And it's meant to mean all of the angels will come, and they will descend in rows, rank upon rank, one row after another, and there will be 7 rows altogether. And the next verse reads, وَجِئَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمٍ, and hell is brought forth then. And that will be brought forth with 70,000 reins, by 70,000 angels on each rein. And hell will be fuming and will be growling. You can find narrations that kind of substantiates this. The idea that hell is fuming and growling, you can find that in the Quran in numerous verses, and making some type of noise, etc. But the hellfire, Jahannam, being drugged by 70,000 reins, you find in Sahih Muslim. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said that the Prophet ﷺ, he says, يُؤْتَى بِجَهَنَّمَ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَهَا 70,000 زِمَامٍ مَعَ كُلِّ زِمَامٍ 70,000 مَلَكٍ يَجُرُّونَهَا. He says hell will be brought on the day of, on that day. يَوْمَئِذٍ لَهَا سَبْعُونَ أَلْفَ زِمَامٍ. We'll have 70,000 leads or reins. And each lead or rein will have 70,000 angels pulling it. This is also reported by Imam at-Tirmidhi. Similar narration. So we have here, the verse reads, وَجِيءَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ وَأَنَّى لَهُ الذِّكْرَى. The next portion of it reads, then every person, every denier of faith, every kafir will remember their sin and their transgression, and they will remember the righteous deeds that they gave up or forfeit. They'll remember the opportunities of righteousness that they turned away from. And they'll remember all of the sins that they committed. But when they remember, he says, but what is the use of remembering then? Like, what is the use? I mean, if you remembered it, he says, يَوْمَئِذٍ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ وَأَنَّ لَهُ ذِكْرَى. What's the point of you remembering at this point when it's already too late? Meaning, what's the benefit of you remembering? Because the benefit of those good deeds is right now when they're available and presented to you, and you can embark upon them. And then the sins and the evil that you're committed, the benefit of them is to make tawbah. Right? So the opportunity you have with the sins that have been committed, right? It's in the past. Okay, it's done. But the opportunity you have with that is to make tawbah. And so, of course, we talked about tawbah to some great extent, about the obligatory nature of making tawbah. And we talked about that, this is probably years ago, in Qala'id al-Ikhyan. We talked about the position of the Hanabila when it comes to the obligatory nature of making tawbah. So anyway, if they remembered all of that, I didn't give charity, I didn't pray, I didn't fast, I didn't make tawbah for the evil that I did, then basically we're saying here, there's no benefit anyway. يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي قَدَّمْتُ لِي حَيَاتِي. They will then cry out, I wish I had sent forth some righteousness or some iman for my life. Li hayati, my life, the life that they're living now. And now, here in the verse is talking about after this life. It's the hereafter. Now their hereafter life. They're talking about if I had something that I had sent forward for this life now in the hereafter. Basically, again, showing us the importance of the good deeds that you do now, while you might not be paid for them or receive the reward for them now. It's something that you will certainly want. Ya laytani, if only I had, if I wish I would have, qaddamtu li hayati. I put something forward for my life in the hereafter. فَيَوْمَئِذٍ لَا يُعَذِّبُ عَذَابَهُ أَحَدٍ. He says, on that day he will punish, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish with, they will be punished, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them with hell. In a severe way, a punishment like no other. لا يعذب عذابه أحد. Meaning like, there'll be no other punishment like that punishment. ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد. And they will be bound tightly with chains and shackles. We understand that hellfire has salasil. What else? وأغلال. There's chains, and there's shackles, and there's sa'ir, there's a burning flame. And so they'll be shackled and chained like no one's been shackled and chained before. Right? Because people have been punished in this life, and they have been shackled and chained in this life, but on this day it will be done in a way unrecognizable by anyone. Something that would be much worse. And there's a number of recitations here that the Imam goes through and talks about how they impact the meaning. And essentially, it comes down to the same thing. The same meaning is that none will punish another like Allah's punishment, and none will bind another like Allah binds and chains those that are being tormented. The next verse he says, Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna. So this is at death. It will be said to the believers. So we've been addressing the disbeliever. We've been addressing the denier of faith. and their evil and their love for wealth and their denial of generosity to the orphan and then their subsequent punishment, etc. So now we get to Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna, to the believer. It says, oh tranquil soul. The soul, if you will, we're translating nafs that way right now. A soul that is been calmed. And this is the type of soul who is secure. They're not afraid. They found the tranquility that they were looking for in the remembrance of Allah. And it was actually reported that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq asked the Prophet ﷺ about that. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the angel will tell you, Abu Bakr, that ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna will tell you that at the time of your death. He told that to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. And in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, irji'i ila rabbika radiyatan mardiyya. Return to your Lord. Ila rabbika, return to your Lord, meaning return to His command and His will. You will be well pleased by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, of course, here you can see the end result, the condition, if you will. That's why it says radiyatan mardiyatan. It's it's mansub, right? Because this is in the case of being what's known as a condition or al-hal. So you return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the condition of being pleased, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being pleased with you. Again, literal translation of those words there. We've talked about some of the meanings of that in other sessions. The next verse he says, فَدَخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي. So join my servants, meaning join among the number of my servants, and the servants that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, the righteous. Join among the righteous servants. وَدُخُلِي جَنَّتِي, and enter my paradise. It says enter my paradise, meaning you join the righteous and you enter Jannah with them. And it's been said that this particular call will happen when the bodies are brought out of their graves. It will be said, and enter my paradise. Meaning, by way of your resurrection from death, you now return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And that's where he concludes with the tafsir of Surat al-Fajr. He goes on, he notes, Imam al-Ulaymi, he notes here something about Salat al-Witr, because there's a direct correlation between Salat al-Witr and this particular chapter, right? He says there's a correlation there, and that he talks about Witr. Just real quickly, he says the Witr prayer is obligatory according to Abu Hanifa and his companions, his two companions. According to the other three schools, it is recommended. The time for Salat al-Witr is between Salat al-Isha and Salat al-Fajr. According to Abu Hanifa, Salat al-Witr is 3 rak'ahs, like Maghrib prayer without a taslim in between, and qunut is made in the third before ruku' after raising the hands and making takbir. All right, if you grew up Hanafi, you don't even need to have that explained to you, probably just second nature. According to Imam Malik, it is 1 rak'ah, witr, after an even number of rak'ahs, after a shafi'. So there's a shafi' and then there's a witr. Okay? It's as if a shafi' is a prayer and witr is a prayer. Okay, and according to Imam Shafi'i, the even number is unlimited. It can be as many as you'd like. And then, of course, it's separated with a taslim. So you're going to pray a shafi' and then you're going to pray al-witr. According to Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, it is at least 1 rak'ah. It is at least 1 rak'ah, meaning the witr, and at most it is 11. So here we're not talking about like Imam Malik says a shafi' or witr. We're talking about it being a series together. So witr could be 1, it could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 7, it could be 9, it could be 11, and all of that would be considered witr. We'll get to that. It says the least complete is 3 with 2 taslims. This is adna al-kamal. Right? So there's the lowest minimum requirement, أقله ركعة. وأدنى الكمال 3 ركعات مع تسليمتين. Okay? So, if you can't do anything but one, then that would be enough for witr. But if you're trying to reach basically like a complete witr, then you would pray 3 rak'ahs. You would pray 2 and then taslim, and then you would pray 1 and then conclude with the taslim. Okay? Got it? So if you were to do more than that, 5, or you would do 7 or 9 or 11, then there's a variety of ways in which you could do those other even numbers altogether, or separate them 2 by 2. Yeah. Cool. The minimum adna al-kamal, the minimum is 1. Salat al-aqalluha rak'ah, right? The minimum of witr is 1. And then there's adna al-kamal, which means the least degree of completeness. So that's 2, and then taslim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then 1 rak'ah, and then taslim. Yeah. Some would agree to that. Yeah. Yeah, going straight through, like just straight without sitting, and then concluding that, and then praying 1. Yeah, there's a variety of different ways. So and we can talk about that in more detail. I just want to he's just basically giving you the basics here. Qunut is made in the 3rd rak'ah after the last. Here, listen to this. Qunut is made in the 3rd rak'ah after ruku' in the last half of Ramadan, according to Imam Shafi'i. That's when you make qunut in al-witr. According to Imam Ahmad and Abu Hanifa, it's recommended throughout the year to make qunut in witr. Qunut is not made in witr according to what is well known of Imam Malik. Okay, according to Imam Malik, what is recited, this is now we're talking about what's recited. He mentions this, what's recited during the even rak'ahs is undefined, though it's recommended to read al-Ikhlas, al-Falaq, and al-Nas in the witr. The other 3, the other schools, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad, they deemed it recommended to recite al-A'la in the 1st, al-Kafirun in the 2nd, and al-Ikhlas, al-Falaq, and al-Nas in the 3rd. In the last rak'ah, Imam Shafi agreed with Malik, while Abu Hanifa and Ahmad said only recite al-Ikhlas. Okay? And the last, in the school of Imam Malik and Imam Shafi, when it comes to qunut and fajr, he says already been mentioned in Surah al-Baqarah. Because they would recite the qunut and al-Fajr. It's recommended for them to do that. Every Fajr prayer, they'd make a qunut. And I lived through that when I was in Tanzania, because they follow the Shafi'i madhab. So every masjid you go to, they make qunut in Salat al-Fajr. According to Imam Ahmad, according to the school of Imam Ahmad, it's bid'ah. However, if you're praying behind the Imam, you follow the Imam. All right, that's where we're going to wrap it up. Jazakallah khair. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد.